Now, as you go into the whole subject of minimum wage and the whole idea of examining income inequality and considering whether it's a bad thing, what you will soon discover is that this is a subject that is so inextricably linked with the whole idea of social welfare and socialism that you could say that they are both basically encrusted as one idea. But unfortunately, whenever we talk about the idea of social welfare or even socialism, we can't really talk about them these days objectively. And one reason is because the word social welfare, especially welfare, has been evacuated of all meaning. So much about this word has been misaligned that it can no longer be used objectively to describe what it was meant to basically deal with at one point in history. And I think we need to be mindful of this, that when we use the word welfare, it is basically a word that conjures up a lot of negative imagery. It basically stirs up the whole idea of socialism, communism, taking from the hard-working and giving it to the indolent and the lazy. You know, all those images, and nothing could be further from the truth, okay? Because when you look at the whole idea of welfare as an idea and as a concept, as I mentioned earlier in my earlier series, what I did mention was that it was a response to the emerging challenges that came about at the end of World War II, right? Now let's go back to World War II, because I think this is very important, and so that you can understand the inception of the whole idea of welfare as an idea, as a principle, and as a body of knowledge. Now, at the end of World War II, what happened was the Allies were really faced with a very difficult position, because if you look at the strategic blueprint of Europe, they did not have all the chips. In fact, the people who were in a position to determine the future of Europe and probably the rest of the world were the Russians. And there's one simple reason for that. It's because during the period of 1945 to probably 1955, when it comes to military superiority, Russia and her allies and the rest of the Comintern, which were the satellite communist states, were in a far stronger position. They had not only mastered nuclear technology by 1955, but they had also gained supremacy in the space race. The Russians were one of the few who were able to actually blast off huge payloads into orbit, and they were able to conquer space. And this was a great source of consternation for the Americans, because the Americans, for some reason, were very fixated with the whole idea of space. They believed that just like the Romans used to rule the world by being able to build very good roads, or the British were able to control the high seas and their colonies because they were able to rule the seas. The key to dominance or world dominance was being able to control this elusive space known as outer space. So they invested a tremendous amount of resource in order to actually compete with the Russians in space. And by 1955, they had basically lost the race, because 2 years after that, Sputnik, the first satellite, was orbiting Earth and radioing messages to the free world. And this was basically the contextual background in which the whole idea of social welfare came about. Now, the other reason why communism was succeeding was because ideologically it was a very appealing concept at that time. And it would not be far from wrong to say that even if you take a snapshot of the general consensus among the intellectual classes in Europe and possibly even the United States as to what they thought about the whole idea of communism, there were actually many sympathizers, many people in high society, many people who were in power in both Europe and the US actually sympathized with the communist cause. And the reason was very simple. Communism as an idea, as an egalitarian philosophy, was very, very appealing, and it was basically an idea that was very attractive to many thinkers, because when you look at the track record of democratic capitalism in the last 50 years, standing in the year 1955, it was a complete disaster. Democratic capitalism was the reason why World War II started. It was also the reason why World War I started. And by the looks of it, in the nuclear age, if democratic capitalism was going to be the ethos of humanity, it will probably mean the demise of the human race. And this was basically an idea which we find very hard to conceptualize or even visualize today, because today when we talk about the whole idea of peace, we tend to take it for granted. But in 1955, the world was basically in a very precarious position, and the whole idea of peace itself was not as self-confident as it is today. And all